Hello and welcome to the CX Files podcast. I'm your host, Mark Hillary. You know how it's becoming increasingly common for contact center companies to offer a work-at-home option, work-at-home agents, or WAHA in the industry jargon. To make it work, you need to ensure that the tech environment an agent is using at home is safe. You need to prevent hacking, but you also need to ensure that agents can't just copy customer data or print off any customer details. ThinScale, based in Dublin, Ireland, is one of the leading companies that provides software to do this. Their thin client technology is used by most of the leading CX companies to create a secure work-at-home environment. In this episode of CX Files, I'm talking to the CEO and co-founder of ThinScale, Brendan Kiely, about working from home and how to make it secure. Okay, great, Brendan. Thanks for being on the podcast. Now, I know that your company is supporting most of the big players in the CX space, helping them to deliver work-at-home agent solutions, also known as WAHA in the industry jargon. Tell me a bit about the growth of this, and what's the big advantage compared to just having all of my team in a contact center somewhere?
Well, thanks for having me on, Mark. Delighted to be joining you. I suppose, look, from our experience dealing with BPOs, the big key issues we're seeing is around retention and hiring, obviously real estate and the cost of real estate, improved productivity and the impact that can have, and that's very closely linked with employee satisfaction and, you know, the positive impact that environmental, community, cultural that work at home can have. And just kind of to touch on a couple of those points, you know, attrition rates is probably the biggest issue that we hear about all the time. And, you know, companies will admit to 21%, 48% to 48% annually. And, you know, there's some companies are on the record around 30%. But, you know, privately, we hear numbers as high as 70% and the average settling around 40% range. So there's a huge impact on any business and on BPOs in relation to that. You know, the total cost of replacing a single employee can be anywhere, you know, to 100% of the salary. I know somebody you'd know well, Vicky Brackett. She's 25 years in the business. She would suggest that the average cost of replacing, you know, somebody in a contact center is about $20,000. So there's huge money involved when you're at scale. And it's very important to find solutions to that retention issue. And we've found, and our customers find, that their work at home programs really help with that. Then in terms of hiring, you know, when you talk about the numbers that we just outlined, you know, if you're running at even a 30 or 40% attrition rate, that means every 3 years you're turning over your whole staff cohort, and that's not even allowing for growth. So, you know, you have some of our customers have to find thousands of employees, sometimes tens of thousands of employees, depending on the company's size. So this is a major strategic and operational problem, particularly when unemployment is so low in a lot of places, and can represent, you know, in the millions of dollars cost to a business. And then the opportunity loss in terms of the ability or the inability to grow in that context. I know Everest, you probably have read some of their research in the past, but they did an analysis of the top 30 BPOs, and 77% mentioned hiring as a key risk factor for the company performance. And that's as a result of the issues that we outlined. So enabling work at home solves this in a lot of ways. It also enables employers to target areas of higher unemployment and even specific groups, you know, who can't work conventional jobs. I think as well, there's a quality of staff being found. I know that Forbes, sorry, not Forbes, it was Frost and Sullivan, did some research around the differences in agent quality when you're hiring for a flexi or virtual or work at home agent versus a call center employee. And a couple of things kind of struck me from that. And one is the average age in a call center they found to be 23, whereas, you know, it's 38 from a work at home perspective. They tend to have more experience, more life experience as well as work experience. And, you know, a higher proportion of them were found to have had a college education, actually 81% versus 35%. So that's, you know, even in terms of the quality of the people you can attract, I mentioned earlier as well the real estate issue. You know, I mean, it's very hard to quantify because it depends where you are. But you know, there are estimates that a call center or a contact center BPO would save around $10,000 per agent on real estate alone when somebody works from home. And I know there's some research out there that shows AT&T saved over $6 million annually from 600 employees telecommuting in New Jersey. So again, we're into big numbers once you get into scale. The productivity is a big issue as well. Productivity is a problem in BPOs and contact centers, and it shows, there's research again that shows it's around 70%, and people are only working to a level of 70%. And at the same time, productivity can be increased by up to 55% with work at home workers when you do the comparative. So, aside from trying to hire more employees, getting a higher level of productivity out of the current cohort is something that, adds to the bottom line straight away, and work at home helps deliver that. And then, of course, there's broader positive environmental and rural and community impacts. And I don't think the cultural aspect of work at home can be ignored. And we might touch on that later in our discussion. But purely from a BPO and a contact center perspective, there's also a lot of regional and city saturation with contact centers, because they tend to get into a city. There might be a couple of them there, and suddenly the available employable population is gone. The investment is made in the area, and we've had customers who use that as a base to manage a work at home within the region. So, and that region could be, a quarter of a country or a whole country, depending on the market that they're working in. And then finally, opportunities to rural communities. We're based in Ireland, and there's a lot of challenges with. We're one of the highest in Europe for the concentration of economic activity within in the capital, and the city rural imbalance is, I think, one of the highest in Europe and Ireland. And certainly we're always advocating that if we have work at home, you're able to spread jobs into rural communities that wouldn't necessarily have those jobs. And also there are people there for whatever family reasons can't travel to the big centres, and allows them utilize skills that they have, and BPOs accessing skills of people that they wouldn't normally have access to.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, that you're no longer relying on people being able to commute to an office.
Yeah, exactly. And being honest with you, I mentioned the kind of the cultural aspect of this as well, and there's a generational issue there as well, that the cost of living and the quality of life that people desire is very hard to deliver in a city environment, where certainly, again, taking Dublin and London and other capitals, the cost is way beyond the ability of somebody to be able to purchase their own home, for example. Whereas if they live outside of the main centre, they will be able to purchase their own home. And I think we're getting feedback from both contact centres and other customers, where in the hiring process, the question, can I work at home, is coming up all the time, and as a key priority in terms of where they choose they're going to work. So, the wave of work at home is rising for all kinds of socio-cultural and economic reasons. And it's being enabled by the surge in technological solutions and we're part of that, and we're really excited about that growth for obvious reasons. But I think we're on the cusp of the potential to be a profound cultural shift in how a significant proportion of the population live their lives. And they desire to live their lives those ways. They want more time, and they want to focus their work into a particular time structure so that they can have a particular lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, that's interesting, especially around the kind of cultural change. Now, your technology makes it possible for people to work at home, especially the kind of work at home agents, but using their own technology, that bring your own device. How do you ensure that that's secure?
Well, I suppose just to kind of take a step back for a second, we come into the picture by offering secure and scalable use of agent-owned devices, what we call agent-owned devices. And our experience is that work at home really is only possible to do at scale when agents use their personal computers. And, when we came up with the idea of this, it was this, we were very aware of the significant challenges. And a couple of years down the road, we've cracked those challenges. But, going back to the problems of using or a contact center or a BPO sending out their own devices, we've really seen it's kind of like a tipping point between 80 and 100 agent deployment. You very fast become a hardware distributor and you're no longer in the BPO game. So the challenge with BYOD, agent-owned device, in the past was it was impossible to do it securely and without spending hours fixing agents' personal computers and all of those issues. And they're the problems that we solve. So we've made using the agent-owned device both secure and hassle-free. So the product we're actually talking about is called Secure Remote Worker, and it's basically a simple Windows application, and it creates secure container workspace on a personal Windows computer while running it's unintrusive, and it's not a heavy application. And it looks like any other application you would have on your desktop. And once they launch into it, they are logged into the secure workspace. They will have no access to their own resources on that machine. The USB is blocked down, all of those things, so they can't copy and paste from one environment to the other. They can't be in both environments at the same time. And before it even is downloaded, SRW automatically carries out security checks with our validation tool in the background to verify that this PC laptop meets the relevant security and compliance requirements. And if they fail any of these tests, they're brought to a web page with a step-by-step guide so they can self-fix the problem. So even before they start working for a BPO or a contact center, this can actually be embedded in the hiring process where their personal PC can be validated using a piece of software that we've developed. And that can allow them then the validation of that and the reporting back of that can allow them move forward in the hiring process. And really this was key to making kind of an agent-owned device, BYOD, work at home, relevant, because you no longer spend hours fixing an agent's computer. So it's very light on the support end of things, particularly at implementation. And they fix it themselves. So onboarding suddenly only takes 10 to 15 minutes. So you're going from a scenario where you're distributing a machine with all the costs that are involved in that, and the hassle that's involved in that, in getting those machines back, the cost of procurement, etc. And then the timeline in terms of getting that agent up and running, you're reducing that down to 10 or 15 minutes per agent, from days to minutes. And our best agents do it in under 5 minutes. So I suppose there's a couple of things really around it. It's also important to say that I think it's a very new concept, and a lot of people find it hard to get their head around. But I suppose it's important to say what Secure Remote Worker isn't as well. So it's not a dual boot solution. There's no hardware intervention. There's no USB. It runs on top of the existing Windows operating system. So that means that the work at home agent is using their own personal Windows operating system. So there's no cost in that regard either. We don't use container virtualization technology to run another operating system instance. And they access the work resources, which they can only access what the systems admin in the BPO wants them to access. So it's, so that's, I suppose, does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely, definitely, yeah. And I mean, it's not just contact center agents anymore, is it? We're seeing this becoming a lot more common in other industries or types of company away from just CX only. I mean, have you seen anyone else using your systems?
So, yeah, I mean, going back on the earlier theme, work at home is growing, some numbers will put it at 115% increase since 2005. So yeah, we're seeing, your standard companies using our software, both, from a business continuity perspective, from a normal worker, so that the worker doesn't have to be provided with a laptop, and just also in a split scenario. So we see companies who have downsized their head office, and they've gone on what they call 4-in-1 or 3-in-2, where you have to work in the office only 3 days a week, and you're required by your contract to work from home for 2 days a week. So there's varying different ways that work at home is presenting itself, and we're active in all of those scenarios. And I suppose, look, it's something we pride ourselves on as a company, that every time new use cases present themselves, we work very closely with our customers to help them resolve and solve that use case. And that's through development of either new features or add-on features that will help deliver the use case that they require.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, and I mean, when I worked in a bank a few years ago, we used Citrix to remotely access the office. And I know that you launched your ThinKiosk solution about 7 years ago. How does that differ from other kind of Thin clients?
So, I mean, yeah. So ThinKiosk is a software-defined Thin client, and Secure Remote Worker is a software-defined Thin client that works on personal PCs. And I suppose, look, we're focused at the endpoint. Citrix and VMware deliver the applications. So there are two key components from a technology standpoint with work at home. How you deliver the business applications and how you secure the endpoint of the computer they're accessing those applications from. So the delivery of the apps is handled by Citrix and VMware or Microsoft Windows Virtual Desktop, or simply through a web browser like Chrome. So ThinKiosk and Secure Remote Worker sits within Citrix or one of the other providers rather than replacing it, if that makes sense. And people assume that a VDI solution like Citrix means you're secure, but really that's not true if the device connecting to the VDI is compromised. So, for example, a common misconception is that two-factor authentication would solve this problem. But really, there may be a keylogger present before that, before they log on. And in that case, an attacker can come in at a later date with the password. So that's just one example. So what we do is we ensure the security some of the compliance we've got on this is around PCI and HIPAA, and we help our customers achieve PCI and HIPAA compliance and help them ensure that the security of the endpoint and the computer the at-home agent is using to access these applications is secure. And the only way previously to ensure the agent's computer, was up to standard was for the company to provide the laptop. But we go back to the logistical nightmare and also the personal things they may be downloading onto the machine, etc. So rather than delivering hundreds of computers and at a 30% attrition rate, which, the numbers just don't really add up, our software ensures that, personal computers have the same security as a corporate device. So I think also, give you an example. We've seen with a key earlier customer that we had. We developed, I mentioned it earlier, the validation tool. So this device readiness tool, and it allows employees to get their computer work ready before they've even started. And it passes 95% of PCs will have a pass rate. Others won't, and we help them achieve that validation. So we have customers who've scaled to over 1,000 agents in a 30-day period, which would be impossible vis-a-vis, distributing out hardware.
Yeah, clearly, because then that becomes a logistics nightmare. Just not even supporting them, but even just you end up needing a purchasing department as well.
Yeah, and it takes in work at home programs. I always say are actually quite a big cultural shift within the company, because firstly, those people are not on site, so the HR processes are different. But also, as you say, you have a whole purchasing mechanism, and then the management for acquiring that hardware, and then the management before you even distribute, making sure that the software stack is on it, and that when those machines come back in, they're cleaned. And we've seen instances where, in order to avoid the time lag between the engagement of the person and the actual hiring of the agent, the engagement of the agent and the hiring of the agent, that they send out hardware before the person has even been hired. And sometimes they're not hired, and sometimes they don't even send the machine back. So, you have the loss of the machine as well. So there are a lot of costs involved, which we solve. And we're a software platform, that enables the running of the secure user session on personally owned devices, and it doesn't interfere with that personal device in any way. And as a company, you don't have all the responsibility that goes with providing hardware.
Okay, that's great. I mean, and then finally, what's coming up for you this year? Have you got any big challenges or opportunities that are in the market right now?
Well, I mean, we haven't touched on it yet, but over the last few weeks, the coronavirus has been a big challenge. And we have a role to play in helping companies from a business continuity perspective and their work at home perspective. We see companies are trying to scale existing work at home programs to take agents out of, or planning to take agents out of bricks and mortar scenarios and put them in work at home scenarios. Obviously, our ability to and speed at which we can scale, is attractive in that context. So I think it's a challenge for us all in the CX community and the BPO and contact center community about how we deal with this. We have people, traveling vast distances to come to work. I don't think this problem is. I think after the coronavirus is eventually solved as an issue, there's going to be a period of reflection where we look at business continuity in a different way. And I think we'll be at the center of that conversation. Just to give an example, we had a call yesterday morning with quite a large BPO, and he had spent the previous afternoon organizing 200 laptops to be distributed to northern Italy. That wasn't in the plan, it wasn't in the budget. Huge amount of resources had to go into achieving that. So we're working with him for a solution so that they won't have to do that they will be able to identify that people have a personal PC, validate the PC, and get those people up and running from home. I think also, we're seeing, leaving the corona issue aside, we're seeing big announcements. A lot of the big players are announcing expansions in their focus of work at home. You see Cytel, Teleperformance have announced, Tech Mahindra. So the challenge with hiring makes home agents a clear solution for the agent-owned BYOD scenario, and being able to scale work at home. So I think we're really at the beginning of that trend, but there are other trends and innovations that are playing into it. Within the industry, we're seeing cloud contact center software like iConnect and Nice and Five9. They're all really simplifying the move to work at home. They're building in scheduling functions built for agents and working part-time. So, we're part of the solution. We're a key enabler of this, but there's also other players who are working at how are they going to deliver their products in the context of work at home. I think also there's a lot more expertise showing up. There's great conferences like CX Outsourcers and the Remote Working Summit that's happening in Dallas. And, there are great opportunities to bring experts together and learn from, the challenges that are out there vis-a-vis work at home and trying to scale it very fast at the moment. How we move the industry forward in that context. So look, I suppose as well, I think there'll always be bricks and mortar call center operations. That's never going to go away, and I don't think anybody's suggesting that it will. But the trends towards work at home is gathering momentum, and really the ship has essentially sailed with the issues that we're seeing now, and has been accelerated. So I think the challenge is to help BPOs and contact centres achieve the benefits that work at home can bring the insights that we're gathering in terms of how to scale that in a cost-effective way. And, the fact is that work at home and agent-owned device now means that it's truly scalable and it's secure. And we're really proud to be a key part of that.
Thanks for listening to the CX Files podcast. Please take a moment to review the podcast because this helps other listeners to find it. And if you have any suggestions, then get in touch with me on Twitter or LinkedIn. I'm at Mark Hillary with 2 L's, or just search Google for Mark Hillary.